.710 KURV TalkBack, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home of the Iron Microphone, streaming live on KURV.com. 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK. We are here to educate. We are here to not to preach to the choir, but to teach the choir how to sing. And let me tell you, it's been hard. On these radio interviews, to me, it's just amazing the ignorance of the average individual in the broadcast media. A couple of days ago, we were having a discussion on the Affordable Care Act, and my point was that the Supreme Court has no authority to determine the constitutionality of anything. And he said, well, but they've done it, so what do we do now? I mean, I repeated myself. I said, once you accept that the Supreme Court has the authority to make these kinds of decisions, determining what the law of the land is, you've already lost. Because once you agree to that, then you no longer have a constitutional republic. You have a dictatorship. A dictatorship of Supreme Court justices or central government or whatever you want to call it. But yet, once again, he repeated, well, but, it's a done deal, and let's move on beyond that. But that's like saying, well, the world is flat, and therefore let's make all our calculations and all of our projections based on a flat world. And I say, well, but the world is not flat. And I say, well, whether it is or whether it's not, it's what we accept to be true, and therefore we're going to determine everything based upon a flat world policy. But that's the kind of nonsense I got to deal with. They're all the same. Nobody knows anything. Everybody's a complete ignoramus. It's unbelievable. It's part and parcel of their narcissism. It doesn't seem to matter if they call themselves liberal or conservative. It's all the same. You have what's that idiot on Fox News, the business guy, Neil Cavuto. He's stupid. Bill O'Reilly is stupid. They're all, it's amazing. They're just a bunch of egomaniacs. What's Bill O'Reilly's interviewing technique? What am I thinking now? No, you're wrong. That's not what I'm thinking. That's the way he interviews. He's an egomaniac. Cavuto doesn't know anything about anything. He won't let the person he's talking to say anything. He's always interjecting. And these are supposed to be the good guys, let alone the other side. Rachel Maddow and all those other crackpots. But they're all the same. They're all the same. Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, who ran a brilliant senatorial campaign. That guy must know how to play chess, because he outmaneuvered people who've been in the game a lot longer than he has, including Dewhurst and Rick Perry and others. Now, of course, they're saying it's all politics, that he really doesn't believe what he's doing, that he's a liar, that he's not really a conservative. And, that's interesting. And Barack Obama is not a liar. Chuck Schumer is not a liar. Nancy Pelosi is not a liar. No one says anything about that. I don't know. If they're all liars, then I'll take the liar that lies, that says the truth about Constitution. If he's lying about what he believes, but what he says is the truth about the Constitution, then between him and the liar who lies about the Constitution, then I'll take him. It's always amazing that, now here's someone who's sticking his neck out. Even the Republicans, so-called Republicans like Mitch McConnell, John McCain, and these other low-life turncoats, they are attacking Ted Cruz. They're also insulting the House of Representatives, saying that Ted Cruz is dictating to them what to do. Ted Cruz is under more attacks from the Republicans than from the Democrats. But that's nothing new, is it? It's the way they used to make fun of Ronald Reagan. When is John McCain going to retire? When is Mitch McConnell going to go away? When are these When is Lindsey Graham going to go away and leave us alone? When is that going to happen? So I can't read Ted Cruz's mind, but what he says is correct. You'd rather believe Nancy Pelosi, the liar, or Chuck Schumer, the concentration camp guard, because that's what he looks like. Now, why does Chuck Schumer and who's the other idiot, Levine from, where's he from? They think that by wearing glasses low on their nose, that exudes some kind of intelligence. Levin, what's the guy's name? Carl Levin, right? Where's he from? Okay, and he always wears. I mean, even when he was a kid, he wears on his, it's just ridiculous. No one knows the Constitution. No one knows anything. It's incredible. Actually, the House of Representatives is the closest now that it's ever been. As we alluded to last week, the term budget does not exist in the Constitution. There is no such thing as a budget in the Constitution. Therefore, there cannot be a budgetary process. Then this notion that the budget has to be passed all or none is fabricated. If there's no budgetary process in the Constitution, then how can these people say that the budget has to be passed in its entirety? How can they say? I mean, this guy, what's his name, Stewart? I mean, these idiots, but they know so little, and they're so arrogant, they could be easily refuted in everything that they do. Either they purposely select ignoramuses to interview, or it's all a charade. I don't know what it is, but Jon Stewart doesn't know anything about anything. He's not funny. Why they think these guys are funny is amazing to me. They're all just these same feeble-minded blowhards. You ever watch that program? What is that? Not the one where they're all supposed to be like smart people, like really super intelligent. They talk really stupid all the time. What is it? No. It's a TV program where they're supposed to. What is it called? I forget. But they always talk in these very inflated tones about scientific things which they know nothing about. You know that program? Okay. We'll figure it out later. I don't remember what it is. It's not funny. These programs are not funny, but they have a laugh track. But then again, in a world where Lady Gaga is considered a talent, what can you expect? And where Barack Obama is considered intelligent, what can you expect? I mean, Barack Obama is a second-rate intelligence. He's the Big Bang Theory. That's it. That's exact. It's unbelievable. It's first of all, smart people don't talk like that. Really smart people talk very simply. Phony baloney people talk like that. Barack Obama talks like they do. Bill Clinton, all the phony baloney guys, the pseudo-intellectuals. Nancy Pelosi, unbelievable. There is no budgetary process in the Constitution. Therefore, there are no rules for the budget because there's no budgetary process. So anything that they say about the budgetary process is made up. It's not in the Constitution. The federal government is not the only authority in the land. The Constitution is the supreme law only under its authority. It is the supreme law under its authority, but is not the supreme law in all instances. For example, the Constitution says a direct tax cannot be applied. But the states could do it. The states can do a direct tax, and they do. State income tax, other direct taxes. what people don't understand is that the Constitution is not the supreme law of the land. It is the supreme law only under the aspects of the law that it manages. Intrastate, it has almost no functions whatsoever. Supreme Court has no functions intrastate whatsoever, none. So every time that you see a state pass legislation overturned by a federal judge, that's not constitutional. But let them get away with it, but it's not constitutional. The Constitution does allow intervention in the state on certain things. Cannot counterfeit money, okay? Other things which are done within the state, you cannot the government cannot involve itself in private contracts. Something cannot declare war, cannot titles of nobility, cannot do titles of nobility, cannot put taxes on imports or exports. So there is federal law which can directly affect the internal workings of a state. But those are delineated and specific and limited. What is not in the Constitution, the 10th Amendment says those powers not delegated, those powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it by the Constitution, to the states are reserved to the states respectively or the people. Therefore, obviously, there are powers and authorities that are not under control of the United States, that are not in the Constitution, and which are not prohibited by the Constitution to the states, that are therefore reserved to the states and the people. And what does that mean? Obviously, it means that there's authority that is controlled by the states and by the people. What else does the Constitution say? The Constitution says that those authorities and powers not enumerated to the United States by the Constitution default to the states and to the people. That means no power that isn't enumerated to the federal government in the Constitution can ever become part of the federal government. So what things do not exist in the Constitution? Education. Education does not exist in the Constitution. Therefore, the federal government has no authority over education. Healthcare. Healthcare does not appear in the Constitution. Now, there are things which do appear in the Constitution. Postal service, copyright laws, providing for a navy, things like that. And those are part of the Constitution. Calling out the militia, arming the militia when called out for national causes. That is in the Constitution. And therefore, it is an enumerated power. Did health care exist in 1776? Of course it did. Yet the government, the Constitution does not list health care anywhere. The word health care does not exist in the Constitution. Therefore, the federal government has no authority over health care. What does that mean? It means that Medicare and Medicaid are unconstitutional. They are unconstitutional. Social welfare does not exist in the Constitution. Therefore, Social Security and food stamps and all those other welfare programs are unconstitutional. So we have a country run by a federal government that is behaving unconstitutionally. What does that make it? It makes it a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship of whatever politicians are there, and they dictate to the country what they think ought to be done. Not what the Constitution says is required. They do not adhere to the constraints of the Constitution, and so therefore they are acting unconstitutionally. Therefore, it is an illegal and illegitimate government. Illegal and illegitimate. And who says anything along those lines? Well, nobody does. Because no one understands what the country is all about. The National Security Agency, which is an unconstitutional organization, listens to your cell phone conversations without warrant, which is unconstitutional by the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says that the right of the people to be sued, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches shall not be violated, but upon and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched or the things or persons to be seized. Therefore, the NSA cannot listen to your conversations without a warrant, and the warrant has to be supported by oath or affirmation of some evidence or proof that something is going on that is illegal. Now, you have all these idiots like Ari Fleischer. Is that his name, Fleischer? Or Fleischer? Who was the spokesperson for George Bush, no surprise there, speaking of one idiot to another, who said it's perfectly acceptable for the NSA to do that for national security concerns. Really? So listening to your private conversations is acceptable as long as it promotes the national security. Well, national security for what? What should we be secure about? I mean, what is the country based on? Individual rights and privacy and independence. That the federal government cannot intrude in private affairs. And so therefore, what are we securing? If in the act of securing our physical well-being, we trample on the tenets of the Constitution, then what's the point of it all? What's the purpose of it all? If you sell your soul for material gain, of what value is that? When you have sold your soul, then what's the point of what you receive for that in return? Nobody seems to understand what the country is supposed to be all about, is supposed to make us different from all other nations. That we are a nation that is based upon a constitutional republic. It is not what a senator or a congressman feels or what their opinion is. When they are elected, they take an oath to abide and defend the Constitution. Who abides and defends the Constitution anymore? The Constitution is not an abstract philosophical document pulled out of thin air. It is an architecture of government that is made the way it is specifically to delineate the relationship between the people and the government, a relationship that's never supposed to change. That is the immutable component of the Constitution. That all power is divided up, and that all new powers fall to the states or to the people. That the federal government cannot assume any new power because the Constitution specifically prohibits it. But here we have the Environmental Protection Agency, a government agency, going into factories, going into schools, going into other places in the states and dictating to the states or the manufacturer or the city or whatever other entity how they must do things. Does the federal government have that authority under the Constitution? It does not. You have the Occupational Safety and Health Agency, which goes into private enterprises and dictates the ergonomics of their computers, what kind of chairs they got to have, what kind of toilets they have to have. Does the Constitution empower the federal government to do that? It does not. You have the Department of Education dictating to the states and the system of education what they must do to educate their children. Does the federal government have that authority by the Constitution? It does not. The federal government funds the public broadcasting system. Does the Constitution give such authority to the federal government? It does not. And the list can go on ad infinitum. Does the president have the authority to bomb or send missiles into another country? The president does not. The president has only executive powers. He has no executive orders. The term executive order does not exist in the Constitution. The term executive power does. And what is the executive power? To execute the laws passed by the House and the Senate. That is the executive power. No law can initiate in the executive branch. So when Barack Obama says he's going to implement environmental laws, regardless of what Congress says, does he have that constitutional authority to do that? He does not. Can Barack Obama bomb Syria without constitutional declaration of war? He does not have that authority. Yet, they assume that authority. The flow of power, as far as legislation, goes from the Congress to the president. What branch is not included? The Supreme Court. Does the Supreme Court have the authority to determine whether a law is constitutional or not? It does not, because the Supreme Court is not involved in the legislative process, nor is it involved in the amendment process. The amendment process is a question of state legislatures and the Congress. It does not involve the president, nor does it involve the judiciary, the federal judiciary. And passage of an amendment requires 3/4 of the state legislatures or conventions to pass an amendment. How is it that the Supreme Court determines what is constitutional when it is not involved in either the legislative process or the amendment process? Is not mentioned. So therefore, where does it say that the Supreme Court has authority over the Constitution? It does not. What is the function of the Constitution of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court, in cases that it is allowed to look at, which are cases in issues between states, between the United States and foreign powers, between a foreign emissary and a state. A foreign emissary, in other words, a representative of a foreign government, not just a foreign individual or person born in a foreign country. And what is this function of the Supreme Court? That when an issue arises between states, that the Supreme Court will look at the law as it exists in the Constitution and determine whether a violation of law has occurred. Now, this is a very important distinction. The Supreme Court has the authority to determine whether a violation of constitutional law has occurred. It does not have the authority to determine the constitutionality of the law itself. Yet it does so. And why do the president and the Congress allow that to be? When it takes power away from the Congress and power away from the president? Because it gives power to the central government, and they all belong to the same side. And so every major Supreme Court decision since the Supreme Court came into existence has almost every single one has achieved one goal, and that is to transfer power from the people and from the states to the central government. And so therefore the Congress goes along because it's more power for them. The president goes along because it's more power for them, because they all belong to the same club. And so therefore, if one member of the club gets more power, then the entire club gets more power. That is why the Congress allows its authority to be usurped by the Supreme Court, because it gives the entire central government more power. That is why the Congress allows the president to have executive orders, which does not exist in the Constitution, because by the president becoming stronger, the entire central government becomes stronger, because the power that is stolen ultimately comes from the people and from the states. And therefore, even though the relative power within the central government may go a little bit more towards one side or the other, they all are on board with that within the central government, because the entire central government becomes more powerful. therefore thereby making every branch more powerful. Just because an amendment is passed or legislation is passed and is approved by the president and by the judiciary does not make it constitutional. The Constitution is written by man. It can be destroyed by man, and that is what has been done. Natural laws are beyond the purview of man. No law needs to be written to say, obey the law of gravity, because we have no option. But man is capable of voluntary acts. So man can kill. One man can kill another man, steal from another man's, rape, whatever. Therefore, laws need to be made to prevent that, or at least to punish it, so that you reduce the incidence. Laws cannot eliminate murder. The idea is to reduce murder. Law cannot eliminate rape, but the idea is to reduce the number of rapes. Law cannot eliminate stealing, but law can reduce the number of events of stealing. And that is the purpose of law. The purpose of law is to create a society in which promotes certain activities and punishes other activities so that we can live together in a community. But laws change. Physical laws cannot change. The sodium atom is what it is, no matter what anyone's opinion is. It is what it is. And we adhere to natural laws, or we pay the penalty by not adhering to natural laws. And so natural laws, you don't need to make a law based upon natural law because we have no volition. We cannot change the structure of the sodium atom through a law. But we can determine what is murder and what is justifiable homicide. And we'll be back after this short break. We're back. 7 the Caribbean. TalkBack. Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home of there on microphone. Just because a law is passed doesn't make it legal or legitimate. The Constitution is the legal instrument of the land, and our government is therefore illegally constituted at the present time. The laws are made by man, and that is why laws in every state, in every generation, in every country are different. The sodium atom is the same throughout the universe. It's the same, doesn't matter what anyone's opinion is. If you want to utilize the sodium atom for some function, you have to understand its properties in order to be able to utilize it. If you don't understand its properties, you can't utilize it. But man, he can just make up things just up in his brain, confabulate stuff in his brain, and declare nonsensical things like war on poverty. What the heck does that mean? What's poverty? The King of England in 1500 doesn't live as well as a poverty-stricken individual in the United States. The King of England didn't have antibiotics in the 1500s. The King of England didn't have air conditioning or a car or an airplane. The King of England lived until he was 35 or 40. The average American lives a lot longer. What's poverty? Who knows what poverty is? How can you have a war against poverty? What does that mean? The greatest source of poverty in the world has always been government, because the government doesn't produce but consumes. Therefore, whatever the country produces, part of that is consumed by the government, and that reduces the amount for everybody else. The government is a parasite. The government produces nothing. Did the sun not rise? The federal government has been closed for 5 days. The air is fresher, let me assure you. But is the government really closed down? Your check, are they still taking out Medicare? Are they still taking out Social Security? Are they still taking out the federal income tax? Oh, they are. Well, then I guess not the entire government has been shut down. Why doesn't the Republican Party defund the IRS? Why doesn't the Republican Party prohibit the IRS from collecting taxes? The federal government, Barack Obama, he's such a petty jerk, closed off the Lincoln Memorial, closed off the Vietnam Memorial, is closing off public parks. Why are they doing that? It doesn't cost anything. Why? To try to make it sort of be inconvenient for the American people. That's the kind of petty nonsense that you can expect from the Democrat Party. Whether it's Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Carl Levin, Barack Obama. And their defenders in the Republican Party, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and John McCain. Now, in the good old days, Lindsey McCain and Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and Mitch McConnell would be discharged. But now they're all too nice to do anything about that. The federal government is functioning unconstitutionally and therefore illegally. We don't need government. In this country, every time you mention the word government and you want to get rid of it, who's going to build the roads? Well, who built your house? And who built your car? And who grew your food? And who made your clothes? Does the government do that? No. What does the government do? It makes all that more expensive. That's what the government does. The government makes laws and rules which drive manufacturing from the United States and sent over to China. Because the government protects slavery, called unions. Because the government protects those of influence, thereby raising the costs of everything. Because the government protects certain members of influence. What do we need government for? What does it do? What does it do in your life? It takes away from you. What does it do for you? Now, if you're a parasite and you're on Medicaid and Medicare and collect food stamps and rental subsidies and everything else, if you're a parasite, then you like the government. But if you're a producer or an honest laborer, worker, what does the government do for you? It reduces your wherewithal. It steals your money. You involuntarily have to give your money to the federal government. Who voluntarily pays Social Security? Who voluntarily pays Medicare? Who voluntarily pays federal income tax? If given the option, would you pay for any of that? Honestly? Fred, wake up. Fred, if you didn't have to pay Social Security taxes, would you pay it?
No.
If you didn't have to pay Medicare taxes, would you pay it?
No. I could, with that money they're taking away, I can give to my mom and dad to help them as they get older.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
If those programs are so great, Fred, do you need to be coerced to buy a television?
No.
To buy a car?
Nope.
Okay. So if you want to buy something, you don't need to be coerced.
No, I'll go buy it.
So if people really want Medicare, if people really want Medicaid, if people really want Social Security, if people really want that to be paid for out of their taxes, then why isn't it voluntary? Why aren't we giving all those bleeding hearts who think we all ought to be giving anyone who makes more than what they need? And of course, they're going to determine what you need. Like Hillary Clinton says, will dictate what you need. Though she gets everything she wants, we can only have what we need.
Exactly.
Determined by them. Boy, she's getting old, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
Well, she's going to need some plastic surgery before she runs for election. Man, those blondes do not hold up. So, so the government steals. If these programs are so great, why are they involuntary? Why is Social Security involuntary if it's so great? Why is Medicare involuntary if it's so great? Who needs to be forced into something that is great? I'm going to send you to Disney World for free. Oh, no, please don't do that. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. Send me to Devil's Island instead. So, but to go to Devil's Island, you have to be forced to go there. Why? Because you don't want to go there. Well, nobody wants to pay Medicare tax or Social Security tax or any other tax because, as you said, Fred, we could take that money and do things which we want to do instead of what the government thinks we ought to do, which would benefit us more. But the government wants that money because it benefits government more. Because when government has all your money, then the government dictates how you must behave. You want to send your child to private school, you can't afford to because the government's stolen your money. You want to invest money in Facebook, you can't because the government has stolen your money and has invested that into Solyndra. That's what the government does.
It's the money we're not going to get back.
We'll never get it back.
Yeah, never.
It's gone forever. How much money is actually in the Social Security lockbox? Nothing. How much money is in the public pension programs? Nothing. And it's all gone. Where did it go? The government stole it. Nothing you have is secure from the government. You don't pay your property tax, they steal your land. The Fifth Amendment says that your liberty and your life and your property cannot be taken without due process of law. What does that mean? It means that life and liberty property is at the same level of importance as life and liberty. Can they tax your life? Well, no. Can they tax your liberty? Well, no. Right? That would be unconstitutional. Oh, you're alive, we're going to tax you because you're alive. Oh, no. Oh, you want to be free? That's going to cost you every year. Oh, no. But they can tax your property. And if you don't pay your property tax, they take away your property. Right? Where do they get the authority to do that? They can't take away your property, but they do because of the property tax. Property tax is unconstitutional, but there it is. British taxation policy was one of the major causes of the American Revolution. We've all heard of it, taxation without representation. And so important is the philosophy that those who pay taxes need to be given a voice in the governance of the country as to how those tax dollars are used. Is stated very clearly in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 2. And it says, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers of persons. So direct taxes and representatives are in the same sentence. That tax upon individuals and the right to representation go hand in hand. And it's in the same sentence. And it's in the second section of Article 1. That's how important it is. Do we have representation of the ideology of the American people in the government? No, we do not. The only people representatives represent are themselves and their cronies and family members and contributors. That is all that they represent. A direct tax and a capitation tax may not be laid on any individual. That is why the direct taxes can only be apportioned among the several states. A direct tax cannot be federally. A federal direct tax cannot be applied to any individual. A federal direct tax can be applied to the state, but only based upon the enumeration of the individuals within the state, exactly the same way that the number of representatives are selected from each state based upon an enumeration of the census. Therefore, Each state was meant to contribute a certain amount of dollars based upon the population. Why? Because the federal government is only allowed to do the general welfare and the common defense. Each individual in the country gets the same common defense. One individual does not get more defense than another. Therefore, the states must contribute a certain amount of dollars based upon the population, because if you have 10 people, then to protect 10 people costs more than to protect one person. And if you have more people in one state that need protection from the common defense, then rightfully that government of the state needs to contribute more for the national defense because there's more people to protect. So that is why the direct tax is applied to the state and not to the individual. A direct tax can only be applied to a state and not an individual. No capitation, Article 1, Section 9, and the restrictions of the legislative branch. No capitation or other direct tax may be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration. Therefore, the direct tax can only be applied according to the number of people in a state. Which means what? A progressive income tax is unconstitutional because it taxes one person more than another, though that person doesn't receive any more national defense or any general welfare. So that's unconstitutional. What does a general welfare mean? Well, the general welfare is not an enumerated power. The general welfare means that whatever distribution of benefits or funds is done by the federal government must be done uniformly. It cannot be done preferentially or selectively. It must be done uniformly. The government does have the power to collect taxes, but only specific taxes. It can tax duties, imposts, and excises, and it can only be done for one purpose: to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But there are limitations on what the federal government can do. It cannot apply a direct tax on an individual. It cannot apply a tax or duty on any articles exported from any state, which of course means that it cannot tax any articles imported into a state from another state. It means that the only import taxes that the government can do are on imports coming from interstates from foreign nations. The states cannot apply taxes on imports or exports at all. The nation was meant to be a confederation of states. So a state working under the same rules. Therefore, one state could not declare war on another country. One state cannot print its own money. One state cannot apply titles of nobility. A state cannot set up tariffs that increase the cost of goods being imported into a state or exported out of the state. So the federal government can apply certain rules to the states, but on a national level. It has to be uniform throughout the country. We are a confederation of sovereign states, a voluntary confederation, and don't tell that to the great fascist Abraham Lincoln. Needless to say, the intent of the founding fathers has been torn asunder through numerous abrogations of obligations, through numerous subversions of the Supreme Court, of the Constitution by the Supreme Court, through numerous unconstitutional and illegitimate and illegal legislation passed by the Congress. the unconstitutional nature of our central government means that everything that it does, whether we approve of it or not, is illegitimate and illegal. And the problem we have with the people in this country or the states is that when an illegitimate or illegal law is passed which benefits a certain state or segment of society, that segment of society is perfectly willing to reconcile the subversion of the Constitution with the deriving of selective benefits to itself. And so the government functions by playing off one group against another by providing selective benefits to different groups. And in order to maintain those selective benefits preferentially distributed by the central government, there will always be some groups in the country that support the central government. Those receiving food stamps support the central government. Those receiving Medicare and Medicaid support the central government. Those receiving subsidies support the central government, the federal government. Now, the thing there is that you divide the country among different groups receiving preferential benefits, and therefore you break up the country into identity groups, and they will support the government for what they receive, regardless of the unconstitutionality of what has been done, and regardless of the long-term damage that is being done to the country through unconstitutional passage of amendments and laws. Of what value is food stamps at the price of your soul? Of what value is a subsidy at the price of your soul? Of what value is a government program of handouts at the loss of the constitutional republic? Because then we are as any other dictatorship, with a government not constrained by law, that believes it is the law, in the same way that every aristocracy and every king believed itself to be the law, and what the king said is the law, was the law. And if the king changed his mind from one day to the next, then that change of mind became the new law. And is that not how our government functions today? We have a government that is not legitimate, not constitutional, and needs to be gotten rid of. This government is a bunch of gangsters that has usurped authority and undermined the Constitution for its own benefit. There are those who belong to gangs and mobsters. They derive benefit. There are people who support the central government because they derive benefit, because they derive unearned benefits. Now, am I railing only against the poor people on Medicaid and Medicare? Of course not. Because where does all that money actually end up? In the hands of the rich. Medicare and Medicaid, despite everything that is said about them, do not exist to provide health care access to the poor or the elderly. Medicare and Medicaid exist to take power from the people and transfer it to the government. Medicare and Medicaid exist to take money and wherewithal from the producers, and through the intermediary of those on welfare or Medicaid and Medicare, those monies are then distributed to the wealthy. All the money in Medicare and Medicaid does not end up with the poor people or the elderly. In fact, none of it does. It all ends up in the hands of the wealthy parasites. Parasites are not necessarily always poor. They can be rich as well. And most of the money that the government distributes through these welfare programs, which makes up most of what the government distributes, does not stay with the poor, but ends up in the hands of the rich, and that is why those programs exist. The programs of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and all the rest exist to take power from the people, to take the money and the wherewithal from the producers, and transfer it to the political class where they can distribute it to their friends, their relatives, their cronies, and their family members. And that is the only reason that those programs exist. Of course, to justify it, they have to give an excuse that it's for the poor or for the elderly or for this or for that. And those of us who really understand what is going on are given no airtime. And those who are don't know what's going on are the ones given airtime. And that is why it is always a battle between two sets of ignoramuses. I cannot believe that I am the only person in the United States that understands how this works. Though, in talking with almost everybody else, I'm sort of getting that opinion. But I try to educate, and I try to inform, and hopefully some people will learn. But the fact of the matter is that those people or those pundits that go onto the airwaves or in the print media that supposedly represent constitutional viewpoints seem to be completely incapable of elucidating what those constitutional viewpoints actually are. Now, that is either because of ignorance or because of they're unprincipled. And it's probably a combination of both. These individuals are both ignorant and unprincipled, and that means you, George Bush. So that is the situation that we're in today. If one reads the Constitution, one will understand the purpose of the country, the ideology of the Founding Fathers, the intent of the Founding Fathers. Constitution is not written as an abstract, it is written as an architecture of government based upon the philosophy and principles delineated in the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed with certain unalienable rights, which include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and will return after this silly, unnecessary, and perfunctory break. We're back. 7 at KRV, TalkBack, Dr. Lawrence Gelman. And I'm going to tell you something, Brad. When the people own our communication get to be a lot smarter than they are, then they won't have to say that. Let me ask you this. How come on my program they say the views represented in this program and not necessarily go along with the views of our communications? When you guys do your drive-by programs, why don't you say that for them?
Because they are actually employed by our communications. You're not employed by our communications. So we have to differentiate, is that how you say it? Between
right,
you,
but I'm allowed to be here. I mean,
you are.
I mean, if they said we don't want.
But that'll sound bad. What I just told you off the air, it'll sound bad. So.
Well, if you say so, I don't know.
Yeah. You're Dr. Gelman.
If I'm, if I have, that's bad to have the commitment to actually put up your own wherewithal. Much better, of course, and to be the independent. That's much better to be on somebody's payroll where they can fire you if you say something that you don't like.
Correct.
So it's somehow negative to be independent and to really believe what you're doing.
I get that. Yeah, this way you won't get in trouble for saying what you say. Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that whether or not our communications approves or disapproves makes any difference at all?
No, I'm just saying.
And
let's get back to the Constitution talk.
Yes, I want to thank Constance for calling in from San Benito. Apparently is a new listener, at least for now, and who says she's happy that I'm talking about the Constitution because no one else does. And that's true. Nobody else does. Not Rush Limbaugh, not Mark Levin. And by the way, I know more Constitution than Mark Levin.
Yeah, I was about to say Mark Levin.
And
A little bit, maybe?
certainly a lot more than Barack Obama or any constitutional attorney. I've written a book called The Fall from Grace. And Scott, I will be mailing that out to you this week because I got some copies in, and you'll get, and I'm going to send it to you because you asked for it, and you've been a loyal listener, so you're going to get one of the few copies that are available. If you don't read it, though, send it back. It is 604 pages. 604 pages, not a small...
You know what you should do?
No, what?
You should get one of the books and just, you know how the libraries, public libraries have those return things outside where you just return the books?
Yeah.
You should do that. Just drop it in there and see what happens.
It'll go into the shredder.
No.
I asked my daughter, who's a lawyer in Washington, D.C., clerking for the Supreme Court now, if she would take my books and drop them on the desks of the Supreme Court justices. And she said, Sir, I don't think I know you. So basically,
she wants to keep her job.
She wants to keep her job. And she thinks that I'm a danger. I'm a risk. My wife thinks that I'm endangering the entire future of my children with my ranting and raving. But no, I'm trying to protect their future. But, well, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as they say. So the book is a study on Supreme Court cases. I don't know how many. I've 35 of them. What I consider to be the linchpin Supreme Court cases, the ones that actually have had the greatest effect on the way the country functions today. And also the legislation that has come about, some legislative acts which have come about from the Supreme Court's intentional misinterpretation of the Constitution, and some philosophical points as to what a conservative and liberal are, the party system, the philosophy of government, the psychology of human beings. For example, the law is opinion. Anything that can change due to man's volition is obviously associated with opinion. Law is just opinion. And opinion can be affected by many different things. And so therefore, if you want to apply the scientific method to the study of law, how do you do that? Because science is fact and law is opinion. And how do you reconcile that? Well, you have to make a certain premise, okay? And we're going to say this, and I think it's legitimate. We're going to say you have natural laws which may not be understood, but which are fixed. Natural laws are fixed. What is not fixed is our understanding of those natural laws. But man-made laws are not fixed. They are opinions. And so what I did is say, okay, let's just say that the Constitution is fact. I think that's a legitimate assertion. Don't you think, Fred? And so therefore, if we say that the Declaration of Independence is the philosophical underpinning of the nation, and that the Constitution is the architecture of the government based upon the philosophical tenets of the Declaration of Independence, and therefore we base everything on that, then I think we have a legitimate foundation as to determine what is constitutional and what is legitimate, what is legal and what is not. Most Supreme Court decisions utilize precedents of other Supreme Court decisions to base upon which they base the new decision. That is not legitimate. It is not legitimate because precedents are opinions, and precedents are not may or may not adhere to the Constitution. But obviously, the Constitution is self-identified. The Constitution is what it is. It is a document that is written, that we know the origins, we know it's authentic, and we know what it says. Therefore, we'll take the Constitution as the fact, and we will look at all these decisions based and determine whether these decisions are constitutional and therefore legal and legitimate, or whether they are not constitutional and therefore illegal and illegitimate, based only and exclusively upon what it says in the Constitution, and ignoring all precedents. And what we found is that most of the Supreme Court decisions on which precedent is used as a source are unconstitutional, illegitimate, and illegal. So the book uses a scientific method by saying the Constitution will be considered natural law, and therefore the decisions will be, therefore the legitimacy of the decisions and legislations passed or decided upon will be based upon that natural law. And if they adhere to the natural law, then they function. And if they don't adhere to the natural law, then they do not function. It will be the adherence to the natural law as defined within the Constitution which will determine whether the laws and decisions based upon the Constitution are legitimate or not. And that is how the book is done. We talk about, so let's take a look at philosophy a little bit. Conservative and liberal. What does conservative mean? Conservative means adherence to the origin. That's what conservative is, to maintain what existed at the origin. What does liberal mean? Well, liberal is opposite. Liberal is flexibility. It means you don't adhere directly or closely to the origins. In politics, conservative means adhering to the original ideology of the founding of the nation, and liberal means not adhering to exactly to the original. It may parallel, but not exactly. And so therefore, is there a fixed definition as to conservative? Not a fixed definition, but a fixed example. That's a better term. Are there fixed examples of governance which illustrate conservative or liberal? No, there are not. And here's a good example. In the communist system of the Soviet Union, a conservative is one that adheres to the communist ideology, which is government owns everything and government determines your life. That would be the conservative element in the Soviet Union. The liberal element would say, well, maybe the people should own property, or maybe there should be a vote, or whatever. Maybe the people should be allowed to run their own lives to some degree. That would be the liberal philosophy, okay? In the Soviet Union. Why? Because the conservative philosophy adheres to the underlying original ideology, which is government runs everything. And the liberal element would be those who deviate from that original conservative ideology. So in a communist country, conservatives believe in government control and liberals believe in less government control. In the United States, what is the conservative element? Well, the constitutional ideology is individual liberty, freedom, and independence. Therefore, the conservative ideology is to adherence to the original ideology of individual liberty, freedom, independence, and limited government. In the United States, therefore, what is the liberal ideology? Well, the liberal ideology is government handouts, government control, government dictating, to some degree at least, how you should run your life. So the conservative element in the United States with a different underlying ideology is certainly different than the conservative element in the communist Russia or communist China, because their ideology is different. And conservatism means nothing other than adherence in politics, adherence to original ideology. That's all it means. And liberal means not adherence or close adherence to original ideology. And so therefore the behavior of a conservative in the United States will be different than the behavior of a conservative in the Soviet Union. And the behavior of a liberal in the United States will be different than a liberal in the Soviet Union. And this is a distinction that people need to understand, but refuse to, because confusion of language is what government likes to do, as George Orwell illustrated in his novel 1984. Now, is the real battle of government, is the real battle in the country between conservative and liberal, or between Democrat and Republican? Well, no, it's not. In fact, it's not at all. The real difference in a country is between the statists and the individualists. What does that mean? That means that the conflict is always between government and the people, between control and independence, between liberty and slavery. And so therefore, that's the real conflict. It is not between Nazis and communists. That is not the real conflict, because communists and Nazis are much more alike than they are different. The real conflict is between individuals and statists. The real conflict is in the country of the communists, between those who believe in government and those who believe in individual liberty. The real conflict in the United States is not between the Democrats and Republicans, but is between those who believe in government and those who believe in individual liberty. That is where the real conflict is. Most textbooks are written by government and pro-government forces. Therefore, most textbooks try to paint a picture of government as benevolent and meaningful and worthwhile. Anarchy. What does anarchy mean? No superior authority dictating to you your life. That is anarchy. It does not mean chaos. But the government wants to promote anarchy as chaos. Why? Because with anarchy, you have no superior authority. Does government like that? No. Government wants to be the superior authority. Government wants to be in control of your life. Therefore, they paint anarchists as evil. Is that legitimate? No. Even those who call themselves anarchists are usually nothing other than communists or some kind of harebrained revolutionary. Anarchy means nothing other than no authority above the individual. That's all that anarchy means. Monarchy means what? Control by one. Plutocracy means what? Control by a few. Oligarchy, or by the wealthy. Oligarchy means what? Control by a few. Theocracy means what? Control by religion. Democracy means what? Control by the mass of people. Okay? You get it? Anarchy means no superior authority. And between anarchy and fascism or communism, I'll take anarchy every time. What is the outgrowth of government? Genocide, war, mass murder, concentration camps, and slavery. Slavery cannot exist without government. Cannot. Genocide cannot occur without government. Concentration camps cannot be built and filled with people without government. War cannot occur without government. Now, does one individual kill another? Yes. Can one individual enslave another? Yes. Can be done through force. But that's a lot different than the government doing it. An individual cannot commit genocide, commit or build concentration camps. An individual may kill another individual. That's true. That's bad. But the mass murder, mass incarceration, mass genocide, a holocaust of individuals can only occur under government and under no other institution. Name one instance in history where an entity other than government committed genocide, built concentration camps, and enslaved entire populations. Give me anarchy every time. Anarchy is not chaos. It means you are responsible for your own life. It is not chaos. In fact, it is the opposite of chaos. because I'm responsible for my own life versus the government being responsible for my life. And I accept no responsibility. When I accept no responsibility, that's when you have chaos. That's when you have 80% out of wedlock pregnancies. That's when you have the destruction of the school system. That's when you have neighborhoods where gangs are in control. That is government. That is not anarchy. That is chaos created by government. Anarchy is each individual taking care of themselves and their families. Go anarchists. So these are the things that are written about in my book, which you will read and hear about nowhere else, because no one else understands, apparently. Where else are you going to read that anarchy is good? Where else are you going to read that except in this book? Because I understand the basis of things and what is real. Because I can cut through the garbage, the verbiage of your political class, of your media elite, of your parasitic element, of your useful dupe and fellow travelers. What do you move? I'm just screaming and hollering here. I'm being very emotive. I want to sound like this. What else is in the book? Okay, so laws and legislations and Supreme Court decisions. And I take the Supreme Court decisions verbatim. I don't paraphrase. I do make opinions, but I show I put in exactly what is said in the Supreme Court decision. And I show how what they said deviates from what the Constitution says, deviates from what the Declaration of Independence, the philosophy of the Declaration of Independence. We have Scott of the Big Bang Theory. Okay, Scott, thanks for calling, sending KRV.
Yeah, Doctor, thanks so much for sending me the book. And
I haven't sent it yet, but I will send it this week because I just got it.
Well, I appreciate it a whole lot, and I did read War and Peace by Tolstoy, so I think I can handle the 600 pages plus. You were talking earlier about...
it's not a question of pages, Scott. It's a question of what's in those pages.
Oh, I know what's in the pages. I'm very anxious to read it, but I'll definitely, I can handle a large book. That's no problem. I'm glad it's 600 pages. That's very interesting, and I'm glad it's that long of a book. I like getting into some details there for sure. But you were talking earlier about Hillary Clinton and
cosmetic surgery.
Yeah, we got other problems there too. You talk about Biden, and you forgot out another clown, Doug Christie. Christie's pretty bad too.
Well, you're right about that, which illustrates that it's not the party, it's it's the individuals, okay, and that the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are two sides of the same counterfeit coin.
They're absolutely the same. I mean, the way I look right now, the only politicians we have that go by the Constitution at all would be Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and Mike Yee, and Rubio does sometimes, but he kind of flip-flops a little around too. But
yeah,
that's about the only hope we have right there. If you go anywhere else, they're all the same.
I was in Washington this last week, and the scuttlebutt in the street over there is that Ted Cruz is doing this all for politics, that he's not really a conservative, et cetera, et cetera. And I find it interesting that anybody that is opposed to big government, whether it's Ted Cruz or Ronald Reagan, is always presented in the halls of power as being unscrupulous or untrustworthy or liars or whatever. Because remember, what do they always say about Ronald Reagan? What do they always say? That he has no recollection of some event or other. But we all know that Barack Obama's a liar. We know that he's an inveterate liar, as is Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. How come no one says anything about that? But it's only the guys that go up against big government are the ones that are, oh, well, they really don't mean it. But you know what that says? That says that that everybody in government is big government. That if you're in government, you're assumed to be pro big government. Isn't that what they're saying?
Exactly. You were talking about anarchy. You know, the cause of all this violence in this country, that's part of it too, right there. I mean, Obama's complaining about people, you know, and it's terrible seeing those people that were gassed in Syria. But what about the 1,500 plus blacks that have killed the other blacks all throughout anywhere from Detroit down to Miami to Houston, all the way to Chicago, all the way to L.A.? I mean, we've had a mass murders of blacks on blacks in this country that exceeds the number of people that were gassed in Syria, and he seems like it doesn't bother him at all. That he doesn't really care. But I've never seen so many murders and suicides, especially in this year in the school shootings. I ain't seen so much violence in the last 2 years that I can recall the rest of my life. As much violence I've seen the last couple of years in this country, and that's part of it too. The government's I think it's a big problem with them too.
Well, it is, and you're exactly right. You would think that Barack Obama would, but Barack Obama takes drugs, so he's all with the drug culture, and which is and he's a gangster. You know, he's nothing but a Chicago gangster. So you talk about blacks killing blacks. Barack Obama identifies with the murderers over there because that's the group that he belonged to. Well,
there's not a whole lot of law and order in this country anymore. It seems like everybody's, they're all, like you said, a bunch of parasites living off the government, and they don't care. And women that are having so many babies, they don't even know who the fathers are. And they're actually these people. They know that poverty. They're not really poverty at all. When you add up everything that they get and everything that's free, they're making more than the person's out there, the average worker's making.
Well, Scott, I think those women know who the multiple fathers are. They may not know to which kid the father is, but I think they've got the list of fathers in there. And but you're right. Look, it is government that creates chaos. In 1950, 80% of black births were to married couples. And now 80% is to an unmarried woman. That is chaos. 50% of all black pregnancies end up being killed in abortion mills. That is chaos. And all that, none of that could happen without government, because if government wasn't rewarding women for having children out of wedlock through Medicaid payments and welfare and food stamps and aid and a subsidy to rent, then they could not do that. It is by promoting, by rewarding essentially that kind of behavior that we get all of these problems. So the government creates chaos, but you know what? That's what the government wants, because under chaos, government takes control. Isn't that what they do? When chaos occurs, people look to the government to apply law and order. Well, law and order for you and me is to protect ourselves, not depending on the police and not upon government. I'm sure you don't count on the police saving you from a criminal. I certainly don't count on them, because who are the first people at the scene of a crime? Well, the victim and the perpetrator, not the police. And the police only come when a crime is being committed. Therefore, by the time they show up, it's too late, isn't it? So,
absolutely. And the fire department's pretty much like that too. I've had incidents with the fire department, and I definitely have a large amount of fire extinguishers around my house with a lot of smoke detectors, and I'll be the first response on that. And if somebody kicks my door in, by the time I get the 911, the police officer get over here, he could have everything out of my house and me and my wife dead. So I'm the policeman on my property.
And that's the only way. That's the only way to do it. You depend on the police, you're depending on nobody. Okay, Scott, thanks for calling, and I'll get that book out to you this week. 7 and KRV have to go to this commercial breaks. 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK after the short commercial break. 7 KRV, TalkBack, Dr Lawrence Gelman, home there on microphone, streaming live on KURB.com, 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK. It's being published by Sarah Publishing. You can go online, Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever. Look up The Fall of Grace. That's the title of the book. I promise I have only about 10 books that I can pass out already. They're pretty all spoken for. I was intending I'm just giving them out for free, but I only there's no money in this for me. It's just going to be cost. But I'm using a publisher, and they volunteered. They wanted to do it. I wasn't looking for a publisher, and they wanted to do it, and they have access to more of the media and more ways of marketing, so I let them do it. So if you want to buy it, you can buy it online. I have, but I'm going to, or I don't know how that stuff works, if it's on Kindle or that. I really don't know. So if you want to, you can. That's where you can look it up. For Scott and a couple others that have been long-time loyal listeners, I'm going to send them a book or two, but I only have a very limited number that I can actually pass out myself. Actually, only 10, so they're pretty well all spoken for. What was I talking about? This book is unlike any other written. I've looked for it. There are books about Supreme Court decisions and Supreme Court justices, but they really don't delve into it the way that I do. They basically talk about the repercussions and the effects of it, but they don't actually analyze the case itself. I analyze Supreme Court cases. Furthermore, when there are in analyzing a case, I'll also analyze the precedents within the case to see if they're legitimate, and everything gets referred back to the factual Constitution. Everything gets referred back to the Constitution itself, because we are going to use as a premise that the Constitution is natural law, and we have to accept that as a premise. Otherwise, what's the point? If the Constitution is malleable and can mean whatever anyone thinks it means, then why have it? It has to be fixed. Otherwise, there's no point in having it. If it can change with every administration, with every age, with every opinion, then it's meaningless. Furthermore, just because there have been amendments and other things to the Constitution doesn't make that constitutional either. I mean, man can pervert any of this stuff. Stuff made by man can be destroyed by man or changed by man or perverted by man. And just because it is done through a supposedly legal process doesn't make it legitimate and doesn't make it constitutional. And it does not. And no one understands that. I don't understand why no one understands that. A law can be illegitimate. A law can be unjust. We all know that. The Constitution is what it is. And if we deviate from it, then it is not constitutional. And just because the legislature passes a law or the states pass an amendment doesn't make it constitutional. It may become the law. It doesn't make it legitimate. It may become the law. It doesn't make it just. Don't we understand that? There are unjust laws. Don't we understand that? Do we think that laws which are declared constitutional but are not, you think that makes them constitutional just because someone says it is? Do you think that Nazi Germany, that the Nazis said that their laws were not legitimate? Of course not. They said they're all legitimate, passed through a legislative process. In communist Soviet Union, did they say those laws were, those are not legitimate laws which enslaved, but they were illegal, passed by a legislative process. So you can make laws which you say are legal, passed by a legislative process, doesn't make it legitimate, doesn't make it just, and certainly doesn't make it constitutional in this country. And I cannot get that point across to many people. Just because the law is passed by the legislature and signed by the president doesn't make it constitutional or legal. Just because an amendment changes what the Constitution says and is done through a legislative process or through state conventions or state legislatures according to the amendment process does not make it legal, does not make it constitutional. The Constitution is what it is, It stands on its own. It is a fact. And by saying that it is not the fact, or by changing an interpretation or a definition, does not make it legitimate, does not make it just, does not make it right. Politicians want to do what they want to do. They're narcissists and arrogant and ignorant on top of that. Government always wants to get bigger. Government always wants to become stronger. If someone goes into politics, why? To control your life. There's no other reason for anyone going into politics, whether for good or for bad. It is to control your life. Therefore, constraints upon political activity as imposed by the Constitution are going to chafe against your average politician. They do not like to be constrained. They want their opinion to be the law. And so, therefore, the constraints placed by the Constitution, they want to get rid of. And because those constraints are made by man, man can eliminate those constraints. That is the point of everything that I'm saying here. That these laws are, just because they're laws, passed through a process, does not make it legitimate, does not make it constitutional, does not make it just. The Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That when any form of government becomes destructive of these aims, that it is the right of the people to alter or abolish that government and to replace that government. So the Declaration of Independence says that not all governments are legitimate, that governments can be illegitimate. In the Middle Ages, it was felt throughout much of the world that the divine right of kings was the way to have a government. And it was promoted in the system of education, in the media, within the clergy, and everywhere else, that some people were born to rule and others were born to serve, and that was it. And that somehow those born of kings were meant to rule by God, and those born of the peasants were meant to be peasants as declared by God. And that is the way the world worked for hundreds and hundreds of years, and still works that way in much of the rest of the world. It was not supposed to be that way in the United States. We were supposed to be a country of limited government, of individual liberty, freedom, and independence. That was the way it was supposed to be in the United States. Is that the way it is now? Are we free? Of course not. We are enslaved. In the Soviet Union, as long as you played within the rules of the government, you could go about your business without encumbrance. You can be a slave without chains. You can be a psychological slave. It's even better than a slave in chains, because when you're enslaved by chains, you are well aware of the articles of enslavement. When you're enslaved psychologically, you're not even aware you're enslaved. In the United States, we are not free. We are allowed to do things that the government says is allowable for us to do. And we think we are free by being, it's like being moving around. We're allowed to move around within the prison cell. If we try to escape from the prison cell, then we are in trouble. Are we a free nation? Don't pay your taxes. Are we a free nation? Don't obey what the government forced you to do. Are we a free nation? Violate an Environmental Protection Agency law. Are we a free nation? Violate an arbitrarily drawn law, by the way. Are we a free nation? Well, then don't do what the Occupational Safety and Health Agency wants you to do. Are we a free nation? Try to opt out of Social Security. Are we a free nation? Try to opt out of Medicare. Are we a free nation? No, we are not. We're not a free nation. Don't pay your property tax. And we are not a free nation. We're only free in the sense of what we're allowed to do by the powers that control our lives. And we make ourselves believe that we are free. We make ourselves believe, imagine that because we're allowed to cross the street, we are free. Well, in the Soviet Union, you were allowed to cross the street, and you had a job, and you had an apartment, and maybe you had a car, maybe you had a washing machine. Did that make them free? Well, many of those people felt that they were as free as they needed to be. In countries like that and the United States, the enslavers do well. They prefer it that way. Don't think that living in a fascist country or a communist country, that all the people in those countries were unhappy. People in government are not unhappy. Their friends, relatives, cronies are not unhappy. Those who benefit off the parasitism of government, they are happy. So don't think that it's because you live in a fascist environment or a communist environment that people are not happy. Look at the newsreels in Nazi Germany and look at the throngs of people wildly cheering the passing in the car of Adolf Hitler. Those people do that voluntarily. They loved him. They thought he was great. They were happy. It's a fascist state. Who's going to consider a fascist state as free? Yet, those people were happy. So how much easier it is to be happy in the United States, which is not so draconian, a fascist state, but we are a fascist state. If you want to run a business or want to open up a business or a restaurant or a laundry or a dry cleaner or anything else, you have to adhere by the rules of government, the regulations of government, arbitrarily drawn and enforced by bureaucrats, mindless drones, who dictate to you your business, though they know nothing about your business, dictate to you how you should run your life, though they know nothing about your life, dictate to you what kind of education your children have, dictate to you who our friends are and who our enemies are. Today, the Japanese are our enemy. Tomorrow, they are our friends. Today, the Germans are our enemy. Tomorrow, they are our friends. Today, the Soviets are our friends. Tomorrow, they are our enemies. Today, the Chinese are our friends. Tomorrow, they are our enemies ad infinitum. The government will dictate to you who our friends are, who our enemies are. It is the government that will dictate to you what you are allowed to do or not allowed to do. We are all brainwashed. We are all susceptible to bread and circus. And if you don't believe that, I introduce you to Lady Gaga. I introduce you to baseball. I introduce you to the Grammy Awards. I introduce you to Nintendo. And I introduce you to all these other things which are meant to distract you and to keep you entertained while the government steals and murders and takes away your freedoms and takes away your future and takes away the future of your children. But we're all brainwashed psychologically. And we actually believe that we're free. The American people actually believe that they're free. But we are not free. We are slaves. We are enslaved. Our minds are enslaved. And our future is stolen. The United States, ideologically, is no longer what it used to be. The United States, ideologically, is no different than any other fascist state. What did that guy want? He was on the phone for 6 minutes. You're supposed to be attending to me. You know, That's why they have kill switches, you know. So anyway, so that is what my book is about. That is what our book is about. And it's not an easy book to read. When I first started reading Supreme Court decisions, it was kind of hard to read. But over time, like anything else, I was able to handle it better. Now I can read through a Supreme Court decision very rapidly. What's interesting about it is that it's all there. They don't try to conceal what they're up to. I think what they believe, and rightfully so, is that nobody's going to read that stuff. But it's all there. And so you can look at their arguments and analyze them and see the base of their arguments, and it's all there. So that to me was like the most amazing thing. That it's all there. And so, but these commentators, they talk about Supreme Court decision. They never talk about the decision. They only talk about the result of the decision. 5-4 decision. Roe v. Wade, 5-4 decision, whatever it happens to be. Heller decision, 5-4 decision, 5-4 decision. And think about that for a second. When our founding fathers created a system in which a single individual would determine the constitutionality of a law. Because in a 5-4 decision, that is what you get. The constitutionality of a law is based upon what a single individual thinks. Does that sound like the nation that our founding fathers created when they said that each man is responsible for his or her own life and that no man need to be subject to a king, that no nation need to be subject to a king, one man? So how likely is it that the founding fathers would say, we are going to fight a revolutionary war against this theory of the divine right of kings, this theory of the divine right of kings. We're going to fight a war against that, but we're going to set up a constitution which allows one person to dictate what the law is, what the Constitution means. How much sense does that make? None. But that's what they want us to do. But when they talk about Supreme Court, when was the last time you heard a Supreme Court decision? When was the last time you saw a Supreme Court decision in which the decision itself was analyzed? They said the Supreme Court said the Affordable Care Act is constitutional. Who analyzed it? I did. It is not constitutional. By any stretch of the imagination, it is not constitutional. But I analyzed it. You have Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, all these other useless, moronic programs, 24 hours a day. And they don't have the time to analyze one of the most significant pieces of legislation, one of the most significant Supreme Court decisions ever done. No analysis, nothing. It's just 5-4 decision, this and that. Nobody reads this stuff. I read it. It can be read. I mean, maybe 50 or 60 pages long. It's not War and Peace, as Scott said. You have to learn a little bit about the language. It's kind of convoluted. You may have to spend the time to look up the precedents, which are listed, when they said, based upon this case, I believe that. So you may have to go back, if you're not familiar with the precedent case, to see legitimacy of the precedent case. But nobody makes an effort to analyze it. You get one idiot on one side and another idiot on another side with an idiot in the middle, whether it's a blonde idiot on Fox News or a brunette idiot on CNN. Have you ever noticed that? On CNN, they're all brunettes, and on Fox News, they're all blondes. Never noticed that?
I don't watch CNN, so no, I haven't.
Communist News Network, you never watch it?
No, because it's a communist news network.
Well, how about
Fox, yeah, oh, yeah. I always see there's a lot of blondes on there, yeah.
Well, you know what you do? You go to CNN, turn off the sound. And then you can see what I'm saying. And they're all like 28 years old. Okay? Now, you go to the airport, and it's always CNN. Have you noticed that? What? Speak up.
I don't travel much, so no.
Well, you can go to the airport without having to buy a ticket. So you go to the airport, and it's CNN all over the place. And it's disgusting. But you know those movies where they talk about a futuristic society where you have all these TV things on the side kind of telling you what to do?
Right.
So, but we don't have that, right? We don't have, like for instance, maybe one day in the future when you'll have like a loudspeaker broadcast every 5 minutes saying, don't leave your luggage unattended, don't accept. We would never have anything like that in our country. No. And of course, we would never allow in our the right of people to be secure in a person's house with papers and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. We would never have a situation where by going to the airport, you are exposed to your body being examined. That could never happen in a country of the free people, could it? Never. Being x-rayed or being patted down, right? Could that? And your articles being examined. Could that ever happen in a free country? That'll never happen in the United States, will it? And when you go to a line and they tell you, oh, if you're under 12 or over 65 or 70, you don't have to take off your shoes. Like, what is it? And you have to strip. I mean, you have to get stripped down when you go. You have to take off your belt, take off your shoes, everything out of your pockets, take out your wallet, take your cell phone and everything else, and put it all in a box to be looked at.
Well, we have to be secure, don't we?
But why? I mean, what is the purpose of security? Why do we want to be secure in the United States? Because we want to maintain the ideology of the Founding Fathers. Right?
Yes.
I mean, isn't that why we want to be secure? To maintain the lifestyle and the ideology of the founding of the nation? But the founding of the nation says that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no issues warrant except upon probable cause. If you break that right and you strip the people of that right, are we still the United States? Of course, we're not. If the government is only allowed to dispense benefits uniformly, but they dispense Social Security to 65 and older, they dispense Medicare to 65 and older, they dispense Medicaid to the parasites. Is that what the Constitution says? It does not allow that.
No.
So therefore, are we living in a constitutional United States? No. No, we're not. So therefore, what is your soul worth? What did our founding fathers say? Give me liberty or give me death. They did not say give me liberty or give me food stamps, right? Or give me food stamps and give me death. Right. Keep your liberty and give me food stamps. That's not what they said, is it? And so there are things more important than food stamps, Medicare, and Medicaid. There is the right to live free because we're all born free, and we have the right to live free. We have the right to life. We'll tell that to William O. Douglas and the Roe v. Wade decision. We have the right to live free. But tell that to Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said that you can be forcibly sterilized if the government says so. Buck versus Bell decision, 1927, if you don't believe it. Okay, I guess that's the end of the program. 7th and Carey, TalkBack, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home there on a microphone. Obviously, you're not going to hear this anywhere else. So if you want to hear it, you have to listen to me. And it's the only place you're going to hear it. We are not teaching the choir. We're not preaching to the choir. We are teaching the choir how to sing. Be back next week.